Hello and welcome. This is Tigray TV English program. Here are the news. Now the details. The Ethiopian government has conducted another drone attack in Azbi, just 40 kilometers from Mekelle. The attack targeted Mahari Tsagai Technical College and has injured 3 civilians. This is just one of the multiple attacks carried out on civilians in the past week, with several attacks in northwestern Tigray last week causing the death of over 100 civilians. Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement on Sunday calling these airstrikes a clear indication of the lack of basic human decency on the part of Abiy Ahmed's government and called on the international community to act to protect the rights of civilians. Another deadly drone attack in northwestern Tigray, Maitsebri, has taken the lives of 17 civilians. The attack targeted a flour mill in a small village, resulting in the death of many children and animals. Our reporters were able to reach the area, but we have to warn our viewers the images are gruesome. For more, Abraha Gabritinse has this report.
The Ethiopian government has conducted yet another drone attack in Maitsebri, 78 kilometers from Shire, the capital of northwestern Tigray, killing 17 civilians and wounding many more. The drone attack targeted a flour mill in a small village and has also resulted in the death of dozens of animals.
I
have never seen such cruelty before. I have never seen people dying before, but I witnessed today. I'm shocked by the attack. The attack targeted civilians. It targeted civilians at a flour mill where a lot of people and donkeys were gathered.
Images from Maitsebri show a gruesome picture of what happened in the small village. Victims scattered on the ground soaked in blood, making it impossible to identify the bodies of victims.
As you can see, the bodies scattered on the ground are bodies of innocent civilians who had no involvement with the war front. They are children and poor women after all. They have come to grind their grains. The flour mill belongs to monks. They make their living grinding grains. You can see the donkeys are dead everywhere around too. This is a difficult time. You cannot sleep at your home as the noise coming from the drone doesn't allow you to sleep. I have no idea what the possible military target could be around here. It's just genocide. The world should know this.
Aerial bombardment has sadly become a daily occurrence in Tigray, with northwestern Tigray as the primary target in recent days. One of the most deadly drone attacks would take place last week, with a drone attack on an IDP camp in Dedebit, northwestern Tigray, taking the lives of 56 people.
The bombardment of cities and towns across Tigray has become an almost daily occurrence. Last week alone, consecutive airstrikes that lasted 7 days caused the death of over 100 civilians in northwestern Tigray. Our reporters traveled to Dedebit in northwestern Tigray, where the Ethiopian government conducted an airstrike on an IDP camp, killing 56 civilians, injuring several more. Salome Taglai had the details for us.
For nearly 3 months, Abiy Ahmed's government has been using drones and fighter jets to bombard civilian settings in Tigray. The airstrikes have primarily targeted civilians and urban settings for maximum impact on civilians, targeting universities, residential areas, churches, marketplaces, and now an IDP camp in western Tigray. For 7 consecutive days, the Ethiopian Defense Forces would bombard northwestern Tigray, killing dozens of civilians and injuring many more, including children and the elderly. The deadliest attack would occur on January 7, 2022, on an IDP camp in Dedebit, where thousands of internally displaced persons were sheltered.
He
is 12 years old. We weren't with him when this happened. People brought him to the hospital. He is injured in the abdomen. The airstrikes are making it impossible for us to go about our daily lives.
I was displaced from western Tigray. I was inside the camp while all this happened. There is debris all over my body.
The internally displaced camp is currently sheltering thousands of people displaced from western Tigray, where Ethiopian forces, led by Amhara militia and Fano vigilante group, have been committing an ethnic cleansing campaign to wipe out Tigrayans from the area and relocate an ethnic Amhara population.
Bombarding displaced civilians who are struggling to find anything to eat is ruthless. We were forcibly displaced from Western Tigray because of our identity 51 days ago. And now they followed us here and they're bombarding us.
This is intended to remove Tigrayans and to cleanse the Tigrayan identity. That is what he's trying to do.
The attack on the internally displaced camp was just one of over half a dozen attacks in northwestern Tigray this past week, with similar attacks in different areas, including a public transport vehicle causing the death of several civilians.
It was around 11:30 p.m. that the airstrike was conducted. I was driving from Ndabaguna, and there were 4 people with me. There was a big sound as it struck the car. I tried to get out of the car, but my legs wouldn't move as I had been injured.
It was 7:30 in the morning and we were hanging out in the yard. Then there was an airstrike. I was hit everywhere. My head, my hands, and my legs. The targets are not war fronts, but civilians.
An official in northwest Tigray, states that more than 250 individuals were killed and injured as a result of the 7 days long bombardment in the zone.
In Shira, Ad-Da'ro, Khasad Gaba, Ad-Gabru, and other areas, the lives of many were lost. The airstrike that saw the killing of most civilians is the one that took place in the Debit. In this zone alone, more than 110 people were killed. There were also more than 50 individuals with severe injuries and around 100 with less severe injuries.
UNICEF released a statement on Sunday stating its outrage over the airstrikes on the IDP camp and said that failing to protect schools hosting displaced children and their families constitutes a violation of international humanitarian law. While members of the international community have repeatedly issued statements regarding their concern or outrage of violation of international humanitarian law, they have taken no assertive action to ensure adherence to the most basic principles of human rights by the Ethiopian government.
Tigray External Affairs Office released a statement on the airstrikes on internally displaced persons, IDPs, in northwestern Tigray, saying the international community has utterly failed the people of Tigray as Abiy Ahmed's government continues to commit crimes with impunity. Abil Tsagabu has more.
Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement on Sunday condemning a recent airstrike that targeted an IDP camp in northwestern Tigray. The airstrike conducted at midnight on Christmas Day was one of the deadliest, killing 56 civilians and injuring over 100. The office called these airstrikes a clear indication of the lack of basic human decency on the part of Abiy Ahmed's government. The statement said that the international community has failed the people of Tigray as the Ethiopian and Eritrean government continue to commit crimes with impunity. The office also said that the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces as well as Amhara forces have virtually completed their ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray, with hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans internally displaced. Over 70,000 forced to seek refuge in neighboring Sudan. Thousands were murdered and thousands are being kept in concentration camps under cruel and inhuman conditions, the statement emphasized. The statement also indicated that the attack on the IDP camp was conducted on the same day as a launch of fresh attack on Tigray forces by the Eritrean government through Shararo, northwestern Tigray. Finally, the statement concludes by stating that the people of Tigray are no longer interested in international community's expression of concern and that they call upon the international community to take meaningful action to compel the regime in Addis elementary rules of armed conflicts and hold it accountable for its violation of laws of warfare.
A systematic attack on Tigray's key infrastructure, especially its health facilities, is leading to the suffering of millions across the state. Our reporter Aragawi Garumkal visited the ART Center at Maqala Hospital and had a brief stay with patients that say that lack of medical supplies and banking services has led them to the brink of death. Aragawi Garumkal has more.
For the past 6 months, the people of Tigray have been denied basic services like electric power, communication, banking service, and blocked all roads leading to the region. Mabrihit is a year and 2 weeks old. She is currently receiving treatment for malnutrition at Maqale Hospital that is able to provide very little care due to the depletion of medical supplies in the region.
She can't breastfeed, so she relies on milk. and I cannot afford to purchase milk for 400 birr. I buy her milk when I got money, but if I run out of money, I make her drool.
Nobel is 4 years old. He has been diagnosed with pneumonia, but his father says he is unable to afford the cost.
My name is Tsagai Taddesa. I came to the hospital because my little boy is suffering from pneumonia. He's been sick for a long time, but I just brought him to the hospital now because it's getting worse. But the hospital has no medication. There is nothing to eat or drink, and there is also no electricity. I am also unable to afford medication. A lot of people are dying due to the shortage of medicine.
Turas Mbaye is a mother of 6. She leads her life selling groceries on the street. One of her children has recently become ill, but she said that the siege has not only depleted medical supplies but has deprived her and her family to a degree that she cannot afford medical treatment for her children.
It is very hard. Our survival till this day is a miracle of God. There is no work and no income. It is even impossible to use our own savings as banks are not giving service. When my child became ill, I first took her to the church for holy water because I have no money to take her to the hospital. When her pain got worse, I brought her here out of desperation. Now the doctors are suggesting surgery, but I don't know how I'm going to cover all the expenses.
Sister Lamnam is one of the health caregivers at Mekelle Hospital Pediatric Center. She described the agonizing condition of her workplace as follows.
The siege has greatly affected our capacity to provide service to our patients. In order to provide treatment, we need medical supplies, but we don't have even the basic things like medicine or oxygen. It's difficult to tell our patients to find medication elsewhere, while fully aware that there is no banking service. It's very difficult to work in these conditions.
Dr. Philemon Masfen, Chief Executive Officer of Mekelle Hospital, says very basic items such as gloves are in short of supply, requiring medics to rescue essential medical supplies.
It's been almost more than a year since this has hit in a blockage. I don't describe only the incident after the takeover of the officially elected regional government of Tigray, which is after June 28th. I don't think the siege was only after that. Even before that, we were short of so many medical supplies and reagents and medication. So since this war has started, Tigray was not able to get what was supposed to come to our region, even if during the time of the PP, it was really difficult to get the medical supplies and other services. Even the psychology and courage of our servants and staffs were in a much questionable position. So, but to come to the current condition which was after June 28th, which we are under total siege and blockage, it's really difficult because health is one of the most, maybe the first, to be affected by this kind of conditions, because almost all medications and supplies we used to get them from the central government, from Addis Ababa. To give you an instant which could be a very good example to this, as of 1 month ago, the Regional Health Bureau has already distributed a letter to reuse surgical gloves, which by far I haven't seen in my life. But you can imagine how the siege and blockage is contributing to this kind of decisions.
The international community must do something to end this suffering. This is a matter of life or death. It is impossible to treat patients without any medication.
It's been more than a year since the people of Tigray is under a genocidal war. So, but still, we couldn't hear anything from the security office or from the UN office, rather than giving concerns. We don't see anything going to the ground by action. So sometimes you ask to yourself the very question that this organization is, what the aim and what the vision and mission of these organizations are. We are losing hundreds and thousands of people just because of this blockage and siege. Yet every now and then they just release a press saying they are already concerned. Of course, it's been a year. How concerned could they be after losing so many patients and so many people that we can help? So I say to the international community, if they cannot act now, it will be a regret to the people of the world. We are part of the world, and as a human being, it's our right to get our basic human rights. That's all what we are asking for. That's not a luxury that we are asking. We are just asking for the basic human rights services. So for the international community, please act now or never.
The systematic destruction of over 80% of Tigray's health facilities had led to complete collapse of Tigray's health system, while this 6 months long siege is making it impossible for the system to revive.
Just before the war, it was one of the leading hospitals in our country.
Getting medicines is a human right, that we are denied of that.
We are collecting just used gloves. We are obliged to use expired medications. They get awakened during the procedure, during surgery, maybe next week or after that, the output will be zero.
At a young age, she's 24-year-old. Her uterus is removed. She can never conceive again.
Either they are dead or they don't have transport to come to our hospital.
How could we ever have expected to cancel surgeries for lack of intravenous fluids?
This has never happened in our hospital.
We are on the verge of collapsing.
After the war broke out, all our aspirations and hopes fade away.
President Biden had a brief phone call with Abiy Ahmed on Monday where he raised concerns regarding the escalating violence in Ethiopia and repeated attack of civilians, especially a deadly drone attack on IDP camps in northwestern Tigray. Abraha Gabertensay has more.
The White House said on Monday that President Biden spoke with Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia to discuss the ongoing conflict in Ethiopia and opportunities to advance peace and reconciliation. According to the statement, President Joe Biden stated his concern regarding the ongoing hostilities in the country and recent airstrikes that killed dozens of civilians in Tigray. The White House also said the two leaders discussed ways to accelerate dialogue towards negotiated ceasefire. And President Biden stressed the urgency of improving humanitarian access across Ethiopia and the need to address the human rights concerns of all affected Ethiopians, including concerns about detention of Ethiopians under the repressive state of emergency, proclamation that has resulted in the mass and arbitrary detention of thousands of Tigrayans across the country. According to the White House statement, President Biden expressed concern that the ongoing hostilities, including recent airstrikes, continue to cause civilian casualties and suffering, and he reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to work alongside the African Union and regional partners to help Ethiopians peacefully resolve the conflict. President Biden's call to Abiy Ahmed came up amid an escalating humanitarian crisis in Tigray, where the United Nations Emergency Response Agency said on Sunday that aid agencies suspended their work in parts of Tigray region after deadly airstrikes on a camp sheltering persons displaced from western Tigray, where the Ethiopian government is conducting an ethnic cleansing campaign. The airstrike on IDP center at the town of David has killed 56 people and injured over 100. This phone call also came amid transitions from U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, whose resignation was announced last week, to his successor, David Satterfield.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was announced as the world's worst head of state this year by a Norwegian magazine named Morgenbladet. The magazine highlighted that the gross violation of human rights, hate speech, and abuse committed on Tigrayans made the Prime Minister a worthy candidate for that position. Sablor Klama has more.
Abiy Ahmed's ascendance to Prime Minister was perhaps one of the most glamorized occurrences of 2018. The 41-year-old was dubbed a reformer from the let-go, an image carefully designed and implemented by his, if nothing else, media-savvy crew. The release of political figures such as Andargacho Tsege and other prominent individuals that actively perpetrated hate speech against the people of Tigray and had formed close relations with the oppressive Eritrean regime would be depicted as political reform. This shallow examination of Abiy Ahmed's actions and its consequences would eventually win him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019, ironically for his efforts to make peace with the Eritrean regime, a peace pact that was also very clearly a pact for war. Now, a mere 2 years since Abiy Ahmed accepted his award, a magazine based in Norway, home to Nobel Committee, would dub the Prime Minister the worst head of state of 2021. The article describes Abiy Ahmed as a man that put a country off a cliff, inflaming ethnic conflicts and nothing the rapid increase of assassinations as a tool for resolving political differences. In 2019, he would come to merge the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, a coalition of 4 equal partners, without due process, as laid out in party's constitution, sidelining opposition within the party. This would intensify difference even within his closest circle, with Lemma Magarsa, Abiy's closest confidant, publicly opposing him in an interview with VOA. Lemma Magarsa would soon be removed from his position and is yet to be heard of. Tigray People's Liberation Front, the party elected by the people of Tigray, would refuse to join the coalition. Soon after, Abiy Ahmed would call Tigrayan businessmen and women to his office and threaten to close down universities in the region, discontinue all public service, and block all forms of transport coming in and out of the region, threats he's made good on since. The Prime Minister would soon refuse to hold elections, claiming it would be impossible to do due to COVID-19 pandemic. A dubious constitutional process would convince no one of his intents, including most opposition parties and the government of Tigray, that would hold an election guided by protocols put in place to prevent the spread of the pandemic. Just days ahead of the elections in Tigray, Abiy Ahmed would go on a national television and tell Tigrayans that mothers will cry and children will die if they should choose to go forward with the election. The world would miss these signs and remain idle as the Ethiopian government would start a systematic attack on Tigrayans across Ethiopia. Today, there are over 6.8 million people in need of emergency assistance. Over 2 million have been displaced, while a 14-month-long ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray has successfully wiped out a majority of its population. Abiy Ahmed would repeatedly use the terms cancer and weeds to discredit Tigrayans, dehumanizing terms to normalize the active prosecution of Tigrayans across Ethiopia. While the world has condemned and recognized the atrocities committed by Abiy Ahmed, it has so far failed to take any action to bring to a halt the year-long genocide. Karl Henrik helped nominate and evaluate candidate for Morgan Bladet's award, and he says Abiy Ahmed is a worthy worst head of state of the year.
Recently released, leaders of the Oromo Federalist Congress, Jawar Mohammed and Bekele Garba, released a statement today expressing their dismay over atrocities committed in Tigray and other parts of Ethiopia. The leaders said that while they understand that a great deal of destruction and harm had already been caused, they expressed their hope that further damage could be avoided with a cessation of hostilities across Ethiopia, including Tigray, Oromia, and Benshangul Gumuz. They also called on the international community to put pressure on the Ethiopian government to commit a path of peace and the immediate cessation of hostilities, and also called on countries who are directly involved in this conflict to refrain from their actions. They also called on the Ethiopian people to avoid war drums by the Ethiopian government and called on media outlets to refrain from spreading hate speech. Jawar Mohammed and Bekele Garba were recently released after spending 18 months behind bars due to trumped-up charges of inciting violence following the death of singer Hachalu Hundessa. There are over 6 million people in Tigray in need of emergency assistance, while over 1 million are living in famine-like conditions. But humanitarian organizations say they are unable to provide humanitarian assistance due to the blockade of all essentials, including the blockade of food aid, medical supplies, and other essential services such as banking and communications. For more, Haile Gebru reports.
Abiy Ahmed's government and its allies have closed all the supply lines into Tigray without a single inlet. Blocking humanitarian aid, even in times of war, is an act of inhumanity. Currently, over 6.8 million people in Tigray are in urgent need of food aid. As a result of the war waged on Tigray and the blockade that followed, children, mothers and the elderly are starving to death. Charity organizations mainly based in Tigray couldn't be able to mobilize resources due to the all-encompassing siege. Members of each humanitarian organizations have been expressing their frustrations regarding the alarming situation in Tigray as follows.
Though international NGOs like the USAID are interested in providing life-saving aid in Tigray, none has entered due to the blockade. UN OCHA requires 100 trucks every day to enter into Tigray, carrying food, non-food and medical supplies. However, not a single truck has been allowed so far. The humanitarian catastrophe in Tigray has continued to unfold.
Over 6.8
million people in Tigray are suffering from lack of food. Over 100,000 women who had been gang raped, going through a traumatic situation, are going through another excruciating experience of lack of food and medical supplies. Millions of children are being starved to death. Besides, lactating mothers couldn't breastfeed their babies because they couldn't get enough food.
Now the international community must give attention to the suffering of the people of Tigray. Humanitarian aid has nothing to do with war. This is a unique situation, none like the world has ever seen before.
Even
to save lives of people, there normally is an airdrop aid in time of war because civilians need food to sustain their lives. The international community must act rather than chanting rhetoric concerns. Concern cannot be served as a food or medicine. There have been countless meetings over the issue of Tigray war. It's been nearly 14 or 15 months since the world has started expressing its concerns on the matter. However, concern cannot be eaten.
ስልክ የለን መራኸቢ ኢንተርኔት የለን ባንክ የለን ኣብዛ ቢሮ መጽየን ክመኸያ ከለዋ ቆላ ሒዘን ዝብላዕ ሲእና ክብላ ከለዋ
There are no access of telephone, internet, and bank in Tigray. You may feel angry when you see mothers and children yell at your office door, but that is because they are being starved to death. All we can tell the world is that the children and mothers are asking for food, are being bombarded and tortured. Instead of medicating children in need of medicine, they are being attacked with guns and artillery. The international community have all the power needed to act on the matter. However, they have so far chosen to remain reluctant. We would like to plead to the international community in the name of all those who are being butchered, children, mothers, and the elderly, to take a strong action against the Ethiopian regime. Moreover, we also plead for the stopping of the rain of bomb on children and mothers all over Tigray.
كنتال طافمصيا انكو حجزوا الليله ذهبتنا عدو لومي مصيا 10 كيلو فينو بالنسبه لا.
We used to mobilize resources from within the community. However, now our donors themselves need donation. There was a woman who gave me 1 quintal of teff in order to help others some time ago. However, now she is asking for 10 kilograms of flour. Thus, a genocide is declared over the people of Tigray. The blockade is an action taken to ensure the genocidal campaign over the people of Tigray.
Tekabo Maru is a resident of Halden district. She is one of the millions of Tigrayans who are suffering from the man-made starvation. She expresses the impact of the all-encompassing siege in Tigray as follows.
We are being starved to death due to the outage of electricity, network, and closed humanitarian corridors. Abiy Ahmed and his counterpart, Isaias Afwerki, have been conspiring to starve Tigrayans to death from the very beginning.
Various members of humanitarian organizations based in Tigray stated that if the international community wants to put an end to the humanitarian catastrophe, immediate action must be taken to Abiy Ahmed's regime, who is entitled to the violation of international humanitarian laws. In line to this, Stephen Dujarrier, UN spokesperson, addressed in his statement that several UN aid agencies and other NGOs will be forced to cease the operations. if humanitarian supplies like that of fuel and cash runs out in Tigray. Likewise, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, WHO's Director General, has also expressed that his organization has sent medical supplies into Afar and Amhara regions on December. However, the Ethiopian government couldn't allow entrance